In the name of Jesus. Amen. Angie Molery.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you. So I got to tell you, it's been fun to be part of this group. Thank you to the committee, the iLead committee, who really brought these women forward and said they need to be on the panel. So it has been a delight to get together over the last couple months, really. We've met a few times to discuss this. And so we have a purpose statement, just like a woman who's in charge of a project. Right? We have to have a purpose statement. What are we doing? So we've talked about the purpose of this is to continue to encourage the church to embrace partnership with women in leadership for the ministry of those churches. And we know somewhat, we are talking to churches who already embrace this, right? Churches who have stepped up and said, yes, women are a key part of the leadership here, and have really encouraged women to step forward and to take leadership roles. So through a variety of examples and points of what we live by, we want to highlight today how women lead in ministry and provide an opportunity for women to encourage each other in those leadership roles. So that's really what this is, an encouragement. We may have some people sitting here who've kind of been teetering, like, what? Lead? I don't know if that's me. Well, it is. And we want you to be able to embrace that and to be a part of it. So there are 7 of us today. And we asked ourselves as we met, so why is this a topic? Why is this important to kind of, as we're the, what did you call us, the cleanup hitters? Or cleanup hitters. Hitters, yeah, which I appreciate. I've never been athletic, so now I have a role, right? We have a role. So how we as the church minister to women and partner with women, it matters because women are over at least, right, 50% of our congregations. So having them be engaged, it strengthens women spiritually, but it also builds up the church at large. So our intent with this discussion is to invigorate and to highlight the unique gifts that women bring to this role of leadership. And really, we're going to talk a lot about the partnership and why that's so important. So men, we don't want you to feel left out, right? The partnership is a big part of this and having this be successful in our churches. So we'll hear it from each panelist today. We're going to kind of, work our way through the questions and the answers, and hopefully it's very conversational. We're going to have some time for questions at the end. So be thinking of those as we go along. We know the overarching benefit is strong congregations, and that's what we're working toward, where men and women really can use their gifts to expand the ministry of the church. So we will get to it now with our panelists. Yeah, who are very much raring and ready to go, right? So because our time is somewhat brief and it's a big topic, and you have 7 women speaking about it, right? So we can get going and have a lot to say. So we've put the bios on the paper. So we really want you to look at those and see, then you can identify, because these women have been engaged in different parts of leadership, both in the church, with ministries connected to the church, and then, of course, in the business world as well. So hopefully you see yourselves in some of the individuals up here. So I'm going to start off with Jan Williams, and she attends here at Emmanuel. She's a Bible teacher, retreat leader, really somebody who digs into Scripture and helps us understand things a little better. So Jan, you have really studied this. So can you kick us off with the biblical foundation?
Sure, thanks. I had a pastor once say to me once that everything that the Bible says can be summed up in the first 3 chapters of Genesis. So when I was looking to see what the foundations in the Bible were for women in leadership, that's where I went. I went to the first 3 chapters of Genesis. And we learned some very interesting things in there. In the beginning, God is named Elohim. Elohim is a plural word for God, because the triune God was there at the beginning in creation. already God worked as a team. He desires relationships. He wanted to work in relationships. So that's one thing we already see. And since we are created in the image of God, then as man and woman, we reflect that ability and that desire that God has to be in relationship with each other and to work together in relationship. And that's in the first chapter of Genesis. Then if you go to the second chapter of Genesis, we see another narrative of the creation story. And what we see is Eve being created as a Ezer, or an Azer is the Hebrew word for that, which means a suitable helper. That Hebrew word comes from two Hebrew roots, which mean aid and strength. So Eve was brought along to be not just a sidekick or an afterthought, but to be that strong helper that comes alongside. So you see that woman was created to be a partner, and there in the Garden of Eden, then she partnered in the work that Adam had. Of course, we know then in Genesis 3, then that image of God that he made us in got tarnished in each one of us because of our sin. But it still does not negate the fact that we have this partnership. It just means that we're going to have to maybe work a little bit harder to make that partnership work. We need to think about how God partners with us and how that image of God in us help us to form a partnership. In Genesis 2, his name was Yahweh, which is that relational, covenantal name of God. And so that's how he relates with us, and because his image is in us, we then strive to be that way in partnership together. So that's what I really want you to think of, is that in Christ, even though this image of God gets tarnished, we in him then confess, we mend fences, we grow, and we have the power then to do the ministry that God sets in front of us, because of what he has, that divine spark that he has put in each one of us in Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Jan, for laying that foundation for us. And so we're going to continue on that vein with Laura, who is going to lay another foundation, something a little that has to do with the synodical and the congregational view of things. So Laura, you want to share some background and highlight. So why are we talking about this now? Why is this important?
Thanks, Angie. I think the funny thing about this particular question is that my initial reaction was, it's 2024. Why are we talking about this? I've been in leadership as a woman for quite a while, so it seems like, aren't we there? But let's face it, in our church body, we've come from a background and a history, and we can create confusion. And I thought some of what Jan just shared about that perfect partnership getting tarnished may be part of why there continues to be some of that confusion. But I did a little bit of digging in the LCMS website to get some of the background on where we've been on the topic of women in leadership in the church. And clearly things have evolved, right? If you go back to some of the documents written in the 60s, it shares that, it talks about I'm going to read this because I will get it wrong. Churches should handle affairs through the male voters' meetings. And I chuckled to myself because I don't think that's a reality in most churches today. It may be in some. And then if you look at the documents coming into more current dates, you start to hear you should be encouraging members, both male and female, married and unmarried, to exercise God-given responsibilities of service and leadership. It goes on to clarify that the exclusion to that is the public service of word and sacrament, kind of that pastoral office that is reserved for men. And then it goes on to say that they allow churches to decide for themselves what's appropriate, because let's face it, every church has come through a different path of history, different membership and involvement and so forth. So because of those varied practices, I think that's an area that can create some confusion for both men and women alike. Some women may feel as though they shouldn't ask to be in a leadership position because of some of that background. But then there's a second area of confusion that I think we should address, and I think it's a little bit on how we articulate our congregation's positions in this area. Recently, someone said to me that our bylaws say women cannot serve as president of our congregation. And my reaction, maybe not Christian, was, so are you saying I couldn't do that job? so as a woman, I immediately got defensive, which is not necessarily exactly what we need to do to iron things out and resolve the partnership differences and so forth. But the person went on to say, it's not that women are not capable or able. What they're saying is that in that particular congregation, what they were saying was in that particular congregation, they saw that that role of president may step into the role of public ministry at some point. And they were hesitant then to allow it to be a female. So I think how we say it is really important to explain in the bylaws maybe that we reserve these roles for men because they have the potential to step into the area of public ministry is a better way of saying something than women can't serve in these roles. It sends the wrong message. So I think we have confusion that results in a lot of this space. And the one final point I want to make is that our churches need good leaders. I don't know a single church that my husband served as pastor of where I didn't see the same people stepping into different leadership roles. So the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. We need men and women alike to step into leadership roles. So I think that's why this is an important topic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Laura. So you'll see by Laura's bio, she does many different things. She is on our board at Lutheran Social Services, and sometimes I don't know how she gets it all done because she does so many things. But one thing she does for us on our board is kind of bring us back to center, and she will dig in and do that research. So that was a good role for her to have on this panel because that's who Laura is. So thank you. So Lana Hilly is our next person who is here at Emmanuel. You've already heard Pastor speak about the impact that she's had here for a very long time, and her role has included many things over those years. And so she brings a voice of wisdom to some of this. And I'm getting out of order, ladies, so just excuse me here. So Lana, you've been in leadership for, as we said, for a while here. So can you talk about, because you speak so often passionately about that ministry and it's really who you are. So tell us about that partnership and what has made that work over the years.
Thank you, Angie. Let me use the mic. Excuse me. I think as I thought about this question, I go back, this congregation, which is a congregation that I've been a part of most of my life, has a culture for at least the last 50 years or so of having a female staff member. So it's not unusual at Emmanuel to have females on staff and then thereby females in other leadership roles. So I walked into a culture that was already prepared. When my husband completed his Air Force commitment, we came back, joined my home church here, and we both took on leadership positions as lay leaders, depending on our particular gifts. My husband was in finance, so he took on some financial responsibilities here at Emmanuel, as well as some teaching responsibilities. And I took on responsibilities that were applicable to where my kiddos were at that particular point in time, superintendent of Sunday school and VBS and some teaching roles. Anyway, so
lots of years of just lay leadership in this congregation, then had the privilege of joining the staff in 1999. And at that point, I came following other women who had been on staff prior with different gifts than I had. I came with the profession of nursing, so I applied some of my skills to the parish nurse role. I was a Stephen leader when I came to the staff position, so I continued in that role in training up new Stephen ministers and looking for potential leaders within our organization. I think the exciting thing here, and that has meant so much to me, is that we have always had team ministry. We're all treated as equals. We're all vested in each other's roles and each other's personal challenges. We grieve together when we have losses. We laugh a lot. We communicate often. And it's this team approach that I have learned through my experience here at Emmanuel that then I share with those that I mentor. The deacons that I oversight, depending on if they're a deacon in my ministry area. So I work with them, collaborate with them, encourage them to share their ideas, and also with our emerging leaders, it gives us a chance as team leaders to continue to equip them, provide the resources they need, and bring them alongside as new leaders.
Thank you. So Deb Hesterman. Deb is at Holy Cross, and she refers to herself as a servant leader, and she's held many roles in the church, anything from school board all the way to chaperone for youth mission work. So yeah, that's a brave woman right there, right? For those of you who've taken youth on mission trips. So Deb, talk a little bit about, because I've heard you speak about the unique qualities that women in leadership bring. So what have you observed that they bring to those leadership roles in the church?
Thank you, Angie, and good morning. On my list of unique qualities that I feel women bring to leadership in the church are emotional intelligence, and that is awareness of our own emotions and learning how to control those, and then in turn using that to handle interpersonal relationships. Another is perspective. So women are from Venus, men are from Mars. We know God made us different. So the female perspective is a light that we bring with us to put on leadership. The last one I have, before some others, intuitiveness, okay, AKA women's intuition. Again, men and women are different, and God did give us a unique intuition as women as we carry those babies, and just, I don't even know how to explain what that feels like, but, and I know men have it too, in a different way, but that's just the female part. So I just wanted to mention too, I was looking up intuition and intuitiveness in the Bible, like what does the Bible say about it? It says a lot, and the one that stuck out to me was in 1 Kings about Solomon. He prayed and asked God for wisdom to judge his people. He didn't ask him for wealth, he didn't ask him for fame, but he wanted the wisdom or the intuition to help his people know good from evil, to help manage his people. So these things, along with a sense of peace and maturity to any and all groups women lead in the church, shows all of us and helps us understand the value of strength and kindness together in spiritual leadership. Some other qualities on my list that I like to apply personally are balance. I'm big on balance. Organization, encouragement, creativity, sensitivity. All of those things kind of like a recipe. You can use some of them by themselves, mix some of them together in all different ways according to your intuition about your group you're leading, so they all kind of work together. I have seen women leaders bring order, organization, discipleship opportunities, and friendships to their leadership. So most important, I wanted to finish up with today is each of our own unique relationships with God, our Father, whether you are a man or a woman, is at the heart of understanding. We have a divine inheritance from God to understand what He has for each of us. Our guidance in leadership must come from deep connection to our Creator and our obedience to the gifts and ideas that He gives us.
Thank you, Deb. Yeah, well done. For highlighting and kind of weaving in how God created us very uniquely and how that really contributes to the kingdom of God. So thank you for that. So Michelle Leahy, I've gotten to know Michelle. I didn't know her prior to this process. And she has been at St. Peter's and is there as Director of Family Life Ministry. And just something I'll share about Michelle is, and so this is a tip-off to anybody who recruits people to be in leadership roles in churches, whether on staff or in a volunteer role. She has written most of her own job descriptions. So see, as a pastor or a leader, you don't have to know completely how you're going to use someone. You can go to them and say, hey, how do you think you fit? And what does this look like? So I thought that was kind of a fun way to engage people, is seeing what do they bring to the table. So Michelle, you've been in ministry, in many different ministry roles for several years. So how have you seen women in church leadership actually support the pastoral leadership?
Well, in my time, I've had the blessing to serve with so many different pastors, and what I have learned is while we all may be made equally, we were not made identically, and thank goodness for that. We're reminded in 1 Corinthians that we're all one in Christ, and we're all part of the body, but isn't it great we're not all hands? Or we would look really funny and get nothing done. And that's the way it is in ministry. We need a variety of skills and passions and interests to come together to do the best that we can for God and His kingdom here on earth. And so I've seen this in a number of ways. Pastors are gifted with many passions and skills and talents that helps them to do a great job, but then sometimes there are areas where they maybe struggle just a little bit. And I have seen women come alongside the pastors to help. For example, we had a woman who was serving on our board of directors. She was very much a servant leader like Deb, and while her role was as a board member, she saw that one of our pastors was struggling just to keep the paperwork organized and everything all together. And so she volunteered a lot of her evenings and Saturdays to come in and help get the filing in order and get everything organized so that he could do what he was called to do, not the things where she was better suited for it. And so that kind of helps. I love what you said about perspective. One of our associates and I had a conversation about this, about how having women helps bring a whole new perspective to a conversation. The two of us once went to visit one of our shut-ins, and we had this whole conversation with her when she found out that her cancer had returned. And when we left, we talked about that experience, and we both saw it very differently. Just because the male and female kind of perspective on that. And so what we have found is, as we talk about situations, as we look ahead to ministry and the challenges that people might have or reluctance to become involved, having more perspectives in the room certainly helps to fill that out. Finally, at St. Peter's, we're very focused on care ministry. We have our community of care vision. And one of the things I've also discovered serving at St. Peter's is that for some women, they're not ready to talk to a man yet. And so I've had a number of women in my office who are just not comfortable. And so it gives an opportunity to sit down with them and talk with them and help them become comfortable with the idea of receiving help from the church. And then we can, eventually partner with them with a pastor or whatever care they need. But it just kind of helps. So our key words for today are balance and partnership.
Mm-hmm. Very good, thank you. So we have Deb Myers. Again, it's been a thrill to get to know her as well. She's a member of Suburban Bethlehem. But by day, she serves at Lutheran Military Veterans and Family Ministries. And so really travels helping to minister to veterans, to spouses, to children, to bringing those families together and helping them really cope with what they're involved in and some of the trauma that may be associated with that. So Deb, you bring to us, you really grew up in a family of leaders and a family business, and you watched this all happen and really were a leader from a very early age. And so tell us a little bit how you made that transition then to applying leadership within the church and the ministry role.
Thank you. I'm very blessed to grow up in a Christian family, and along the way, my parents and grandparents were very strong leaders in the church, and both my husband's family and my family had family-owned businesses for generations, and so I got to witness their servanthood and their leadership within their various roles. And then as I got older, going to school, the teachers and the counselors, they were all good mentors to me as well in my Christian faith and walk. Again, cultivating that leadership again. I have to give a shout out to the ladies of the church though, because they were my biggest mentors, especially through early marriage. Just being there to encourage me in the various stages of life, and they still do. I love them all very dearly. They are my mentor partners, and that is so important for everyone in the church to be a mentor and a partner, as we've been talking. And then about 4 years ago, God directed me to Lutheran Military Veterans and Families Ministries, and there is where I clearly could see all the different aspects of my life through good times and tough times, that He was preparing me for what I'm doing today. So I'm very grateful, very thankful for all the mentors and partners along the way, and it is just a soul-satisfying position. So thank you.
Yeah, I like that, soul-satisfying. I'm going to use that. That's a good one. I like that phrase. So Laura, will you talk a little bit about, you've seen women lead in the church, whether they've had a title or not, so in official roles and unofficial roles. And then I think you're also going to talk a little bit about how you go from professional leadership outside the church, and how does that then apply inside the church?
Okay, well, I think women step into leadership all the time, and sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. Probably true for men too, but some of the examples I thought of as we contemplated this area, I've watched women when, let's just say there's a family in crisis, step forward, recognize the breadth of the need. Maybe it's clothing, maybe it's shelter, maybe it's rides, maybe it's food, maybe it's funds, and organize a whole team of individuals to come to the aid of that family. And it's it almost gives you chills thinking about how wonderful and how that is such a demonstration of Christ in action. And I've seen women do that over and over through my years in churches. I think, too, that sometimes I see women influencing, and leadership is a lot about influencing things. You don't necessarily have the authority in certain situations, but there is influence going on often where women are hearing something about a decision. Maybe they thought, ooh, that's not reflective of all perspectives. Then sharing with maybe a committee member or a board member that's involved in that decision, their perspective on it to influence understanding and then maybe a different outcome. I've seen that happen routinely across the years. And I think women oftentimes don't even see that as leadership, but I see that as really tremendous leadership. And as it relates to how leadership outside and in the professional world kind of correlates to leadership in the church, I don't see a lot of difference. Maybe if you believe that leadership is all about authority and top-down decision-making, but I can tell you that's not successful for me in leadership. I have failed terribly when I've tried to take, the bull by the horns and say it's going to be this way. What I've found is that the role that I play most successfully as leader is really encouraging the people that are around me, helping clear boundaries and barriers that they might see that are in their way, and just being a constant celebrator of the different successes that we see along the way. That those steps in leadership are more important in accomplishing work than anything else I do, and I think that correlates directly in the church, and I think that's what is so neat about church work, is that you generally are bringing a cross-section together of very different individuals to lead some effort, to accomplish some purpose, and what you as a leader are doing is helping coordinate all of that, identify who can be leaders of different pieces of the work, and encouraging them, helping them see ways to accomplish what they can do in that regard. And so I see that as very similar. The one difference I will say that is a little unique is that in the church, you're leading volunteers generally. All volunteers, maybe not all, but mostly volunteers. And that is a uniqueness, I think, in the church, because you don't have that. You can't take corrective action with a volunteer very easily. But you can supplement those volunteers that are struggling, with other team members to bring them along. There's different ways you can approach it, but I would say that is probably the one unique thing in the church when you're working with a variety of volunteers is that they are indeed doing it of their own free will.
Right. Yes. Well, and so hopefully you're seeing that we're defining leadership broadly, and that really all of us can see ourselves in those roles of leadership, whether it's a project or gathering items. I mean, I like the fact that we're broadening this to really look. Leadership takes on many different forms in the church. So then, Michelle, let's go back to you. So you had people say to you over the last few years, me? I'm not a leader. Why are you talking to me about this? So tell us a little bit about what is your response to that when people say that?
I've heard that a lot from some of you in this room.
She's calling you out.
And I think it speaks to this idea of leadership maybe being defined a little too narrowly. I think sometimes we think a leader has to be the person who's at the front of the room, the loudest voice, telling everybody what to do. But leadership is an action, not a role or a position. And we are leaders in so many different ways. And as you talk to somebody who says, I'm not a leader, that's not me, I don't want to be out in front, you find out, well, but in their family, they're a leader. And in their communities, they're leaders in various ways. And it's really, we have so many different spheres of influence as we live out our vocation that most of them are already leaders, they just don't recognize that. I found a quote I loved about leaders, and it said, great leaders don't set out to be a leader. They set out to make a difference. It's never about the role, always about the goal. We saw this in action last year at the conclusion of our first group of iLead training. And we had a woman who had gone through the training, and we weren't sure quite where she was going to plug into the ministry. But in talking with her, she really had a heart for those who were having a hard time connecting to our ministry. She had joined St. Peter's during COVID, and so a lot of our programs weren't running, and it was harder to know who are the people, what can I do, how can I be here? And in talking to her, we're like, okay, then let's make a difference here. And so now she is responsible for meeting with and having conversations with everybody who joins the church. And as she's doing so, she's finding out what are your passions, what are your interests, what are your skills and talents, and how can we plug you into ministry in that way, starting from that perspective. This is something we've always had a heart for at St. Peter's, but haven't always had the time to do it. So having her step forward and say, I want to do this, has made a huge difference in helping us plug people into ministry. to help you all out, she administers something we call the Spark Inventory, and I've given you a copy of that in the back of the handout packet, which is the just real simple sheet of paper she takes into these interviews just to get to know the people and figure out how to plug them into ministry.
So yes, in our effort to be very practical, which we love, having a copy of that, Michelle was gracious enough to share this with us. So this might be a very simple way, a very straightforward way to start that conversation and get that ball rolling. So, and thank you for sharing one of the benefits of iLead and how you've seen that. I think that's encouraging to all of us and to the committee to keep moving forward, how this has been made such an impact. So Jan, in our discussions, you've talked about the importance of women in leadership and advocating in the church for each other and building that partnership. So talk about some ways to advocate and to build that leadership partnership.
Right, building on what Michelle talked about. I think part of that is intentionality. Everyone has eyes and everyone has ears. And as we are part of the body of Christ and we walk beside each other day by day as we have conversations, we need to be intentional. What are the skills that this person has? What are the interests these people have? You know, our pastors have many things to do. They can't know every single person in your congregation well enough to know the skills and the strengths that they might bring to the table. But as a lay person, as we work in community, as we sit in Bible studies, as we have coffee together, as we serve together, all of a sudden, then these skills, and especially our spiritual gifts, start to come up to the top. I've found in my serving that many times what I have needed to do when I'm working with someone new that I don't know very well is I need to invite them to come along with me and serve on a team or a committee. And I may not really understand what their gifting is yet, but as we work together, even though the role I asked them to do might not be specifically to their gifting, but in the working together, that gift seems to rise to the top. And so then the next time I'll go, you're all about hospitality. All right, next time I use you, this is how I'm going to use you. Oh, you were an event planner? Let me tell you, there's a spot for you here. Oh, you really have a heart for caring for elderly people. Lana and I talked about that this morning. If you have a heart for that, there are people in your congregation that are busy and trying to be part of that sandwich generation that takes care of the elderly as well as the young. How do you use that experience to serve and minister to someone else? How do you use that to equip somebody to walk beside somebody as they go through a crisis? So first of all, I would say be eyes and ears and be intentional in looking for those people that could serve alongside you or serve along a pastor, or let your pastor or your leadership in church know, I have this great person that could do this or that. And I think the hardest part then for us then is to follow up and make sure that person gets plugged in. We're really busy people, and it's hard to get those people plugged in. Where can they serve? How can they help? What do I need to ask them to do? So I would say that's number one, all right? The next thing that I thought about was, as women in the congregation, I think one of the things that we could do is to encourage our women to dig more deeply into God's Word. Ever since I was a young woman, I had a desire to study. That's just who I am. But part of my difficulties were finding some place or materials that were deeply rooted in Scripture enough and also very gospel-based. So throughout my young years, I went to Bible Study Fellowship, great study, but comes from a fundamental background, lots of law. I went to Precepts, which is another fundamentalist study, and I did a lot of Beth Moore, all right? All great stories and all great studies, all great people doing that. I learned huge amounts. But every time I used those studies, I needed to put on a gospel lens. And sometimes I would catch things and sometimes I wouldn't. I didn't come from a Concordia background. I didn't take theology in a college. That was not my degree. But I had this desire. So one of the things I think that as a church body we can think about, and also in our individual congregations, are we providing opportunities for in-depth study? Who do we have in our congregation that is young and ready to go, that we can equip, who might write the next great Bible study with that gospel foundation? Who is that? Who can we encourage in that way? So to lift those people up and find ways that women can grow deeper theologically and biblically. Because you know what? Who leads other women in studies? Who does who does Sunday school? When you think about who does a lot of teaching within the church, we find it's our women. And have we equipped them? That's one thing that I think we probably could really work on. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is a regular check-in. My husband and I have a kind of a funny thing that we do every year when it comes time to our anniversary. We kind of joke around and say, okay, are we going to sign up for the next year? All right, so are we going to stay married for another year? Are we going to sign up for this? But really, it's a great opportunity to kind of look at and say, well, what was good? What was hard? What do we need to change? Are we in for the long haul? And as we partner in ministry together, men and women, we need to sit down with each other after a year of ministry or after something that we've done and sit down. Okay, well, how are you doing? Well, how are you doing? Well, what was great about this? What wasn't so great about this? How can I encourage you? How can we make this different? What other ways can I help you? So I would say that was that thing, that regular accountability, checking in, encouraging, and coming alongside. There's so much to do and so little time. But if we share those concerns, we can really encourage and congratulate and reap a great harvest at the end.
So you see that Jan is a great resource when it comes to Bible studies. And so if you're someone who has thought, I don't know if I can lead a Bible study or what does that look like, I would say have coffee with Jan. She just, it comes from her. I mean, we can see that that's her gift. And so would be a good coach and mentor in that. So speaking of coaching and mentor and encouraging, really kind of the next generation of leaders, Lana, tell us a little bit about your experience and how you do that, because you've done some of that. Share with us.
Well, in thinking about this and preparing, I have to say I was really excited yesterday because I got 2 emails from individuals that I see my role with them as a mentor role. And so a little bit of background. First individual, about a month ago, I think I met with an individual who is going to take on or has taken on a congregational health role in a sister congregation. So it's what I would call a parish nurse. And so she called. And we have a network throughout LCMS of parish nurses, so somehow she got my name from this network. So we were able to meet, talk about the role, talk about what she is doing so far. She is a nurse, and we were able to talk about things like where do you go synodically to get the training that you need to get certification? Where do you go for continuing education? Where do you go for resources that are going to help you in your ministry? I was able to share some of my resources with her. We talked about the need for the huge need for pastoral support in her role. The fact that she needs a budget and what does that look like, a very practical piece, and just kind of discuss her upcoming ministry and what she was going to do. I planned to check in with her in a few weeks to see how things are going, and she contacted me yesterday to say, I have this event coming up, and I need this resource person to come and speak to this group. Do you have anyone you would suggest? And we've used an individual several times, so I had an opportunity to tell her that. So that's an exciting thing for me. That's one way that we mentor. And last year's iLead class, I think it was last year's, gave us a new deacon in the caregiving area. And family area. I have a caregiving deacon that I've mentored for years. This is a deacon in the family ministry area, and she approached me because one of the things I'm doing right now falls into her family ministry area, and approached me as to what could she share with the council, what kind of needs did we have, what was I thinking, and it was very timely because we are thinking of evaluating that area, putting some real changes into that area in the years to come, and I was able to say, let's talk about it. Here's what I'm thinking, and got a response back and have a meeting with her next week. So this is a brand new emerging leader, and I'm so excited because she's really taking off well so we can collaborate, and I hope to see her, just watch her grow in that role.
So this is really an encouragement to those of you in leadership and have been in leadership for a while to look for others in your congregation, or what I like what you're saying is the partnering across congregational lines. So this is a great kind of opportunity to begin that as you meet people through iLead and through the experience over the last, 8 weeks, to be able to look across congregational lines and say, is there someone out there? You know, can I call one of these women, or is there someone in another congregation that I can reach out to because I want to learn about how to lead this? Or those of you that are leading, who can I guide, encourage, and take on? Did you have another comment you wanted to make? Okay, all right. You were ready to go. I was like, I don't want to, if you had something, I didn't want to cut that off. So Deb Hesterman, talk a little bit about the practical leadership advice your current self would give to your former self.
Oh, the younger me.
Yeah. I wasn't going to say younger, I said former.
I think the first thing is, and I know God's timeline is perfect, but if I could go back or talk to my younger self, closer connection, relationship with Jesus, especially through Scripture, because that's where I found truth. And aligning with God's Word and teaching brings me confidence in my leadership to to make sure I know, or think I understand what His path is or His guidance is for me. Also, to listen closely to the leaders that are mentoring you, or I think I needed to listen a little bit more closely to the mentors that were leading me. I heard Laura say, take the bull by the horns and go. Well, I was really good at that for a really long time. Get out of my way. Also, leadership has many styles, like Michelle was saying, and not to shy away from leadership because you are quiet or shy or non-confrontational. There are many, many leadership positions for all kinds of personalities. And then, I think the last two are, I believe women give men the strength and courage to be kind, and men give women the strength and courage to be strong.
Great, thank you. And thanks for that reminder, too. We had some conversation about whether we were introvert or extrovert. And I think we think about leaders as being extroverts because those are sometimes the leaders we see. I almost think every one of us made reference to ourselves as introverts, or we felt like some of the time at least we were. So don't let those labels stop us from getting involved and engaged. So Deb Myers, let's look practically at this. So how would you guide a woman who's been thinking about getting involved in leadership? What would you say would be good next steps?
Well, for the seasoned churchgoer woman that's been at the congregation for a while, Jan said it pretty eloquently. You got eyes and ears, and bring that individual along aside. For those that are newer to the church, or maybe you've just come into a new congregation and you're not sure where to start, I would recommend going to the deaconess or the woman leader of that congregation. Introduce yourself. Let her know what your interests are, what your skill set is, what you can offer to the church, and just kind of walk alongside that new mentor partner there. She'll link you up with someone that would fit your skill set. And then, if you feel like you need a little more comfort, ask that mentor partner to go with you when you first lead whatever it is you're going to do, if it's a Bible study or whatever, so that you have that team support feel. And then if you feel strong enough to take it on as a leader on your own, then spread your wings and lead, because you are now the next leader, mentor, partner within that church for the next generation, and we need that.
Yeah, and a good reminder that it's okay to do it in teams. If you know me very well, I almost do everything in a team. That's why I love having a whole panel up here. Last year, Doug Schwartz and I did this together. Even when people ask me to do things at church, I'm like, I need a co-coordinator or something. Because it's a nice balance of skill sets, knowing what we're good at and what we need assistance with. So just a couple more things I'm going to throw out to the group. One of them is just talking a little bit about how you recall that you knew God was guiding you and preparing you for leadership. I don't know if a couple of you would share kind of what did that feel like? If there's somebody in the group here today feeling a nudge, how did you experience that? And did you say no at first, or you dive right in? Okay, Deb.
I've got a big one. And it was only 6 years ago. And so I think, like when I'm thinking about this, I'm just one person that never thought of myself as a leader, but wanted to teach school and, being a mama and all that. You are a leader, but I didn't really realize that. But 6 years ago, I was on the treadmill at the YMCA, and it was National Day of Prayer, and I was watching the television that told me it was National Day of Prayer in Fort Wayne. And I guess in my mind, I always thought National Day of Prayer, the celebration of it in Fort Wayne was only for like church leaders and government leaders in our city and things, and I really wasn't allowed to go to that. Anyway, I had the misunderstanding. So as I was watching this, and they were telling the sites available that you could go to for National Day of Prayer, I thought, well, why couldn't the YMCA be a host site for the National Day of Prayer? We are the Young Men's Christian Association. And I truly believe God put that in my mind and then my thought, and that kind of goes back to where I was talking about being obedient to the ideas and gifts He gives us. So I just got on a mission, and I asked around, and I was given a person's name to contact, and his name is Dr. Tim Holman, and he's been in Fort Wayne a long time. He's a younger man than me, and he was a pastor, and he left his church to become the director of Christian emphasis for the YMCA. Long story short, that next year we had our first National Day of Prayer at the YMCA Parkview DuPont location, and today all 8 of our YMCAs are a host site for the National Day of Prayer, and some of them include breakfasts, and some of them just do like maybe 45-minute, 1-hour worship service, and it's so cool. And it's just from that thought God put in my brain, and so for some reason I just went, okay, I'll do that.
So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, being open, and you never know where you're going to be, right? When God gives the call. Anyone else have a example of when you really felt?
I'll just share that I think the places I didn't ever see myself being a leader or pursuing leadership in the church, but somebody would ask, could you do this, right? So I think a lot of what transpired is some trial and error kind of experiences where I stepped in to do a few things and didn't really love what I was doing. Sometimes it turned into a really good experience, but sometimes it wasn't. And so I think what that allowed me, though, is opportunities to serve and find out where I was more gifted than other places. And I think that's something really important for all of us, to not be afraid to step in and do something. Because I think we're also hardest on our own performance often, and what we did do in that particular situation where we didn't feel it was really fitted for us still was a gift to and a blessing to the individuals involved, but maybe it taught us something about where we felt we could serve better. So,
Yeah, that's great advice. Because we've all had those times when we've gotten involved in something and think, I don't want to do that again. Like that was not me. I was super uncomfortable. What I hear you saying is try it again. That use that time to help us learn about ourselves. Yeah, and I've done that as well. You think something, it looks like it should be you, and then you try it and think that's not me at all. So if you're sitting there thinking, I've had some experiences, please give yourselves another shot, right? Get involved in something else. So let's also, one more question here before we open it up for questions. So let's talk a little bit about the rewards of this work. So we do it as service, but what does this do for you personally? What kind of what have you seen as far as individual growth?
I think the best way that I can explain what happens when you are in the lane where God has called you to be is that even when it's hard, and even when things may not go quite the way you wanted them to go, there's still joy. And that you cannot wait to go ahead and do the next thing. I, like Laura, have served in ways that I probably should not have, because that was not a great experience for me, but every time you learn. But it seems to me that when you are in that spot that God has called you to, that there's just a lot of joy there. And I wish that for each one of you. It's a great experience.
I'm going to add a couple things there too. I think one thing that I've really loved about being involved in leadership is the relationships that you build. I have this recollection of being scared to death about leading an endowment committee in one of our churches. And the fear factor was because one of the members of the endowment committee was a very vocal, well-respected female member who had deep pockets, was extremely generous, and you didn't want to get on this person's wrong side. And I just remember being so fearful about how am I going to, but the work that we did together built such a lovely relationship that was a strong foundation for our relationship for the rest of our time together. And I will cherish that for the rest of my life. Another situation where I did it once, and I wouldn't do it again, so God bless anyone who does lead VBS. But the complexity of delivering a really nice VBS program is extreme. So, but on top of that, it was probably one of my most interesting leaders of a volunteer who was not doing what they committed to do. It was a difficult leadership thing, but the memories I have of what that team came together to deliver, despite some of the challenges, is that we brought in, it was the largest turnout that we had for VBS at that point in time, and we served many more community children than we served church children. And that, to me, was just a treasure, because the potential, the seeds that God sowed that week in those lives, you You just can't imagine what that's done, right? So, and then I just have to share this too, because personal development, I think, is another big thing that you get out of leadership. And Jan and I are together working on a fine arts camp. And I was so excited to get involved in the group that's going to help pull this off. But I think I went in thinking I would be something that I won't be in this group. But I think it's turned out that I have a little niche. Yes. But it's not what I envisioned going in. So I think every time you learn something new about yourself. And I think that's precious for each one of us to take away. So don't miss those opportunities. Volunteer. Talk to your pastors. Talk to your deacons. Talk to somebody and find places where you can grow and meet new people and just have fun.
Life is so busy, and I think sometimes we can get really caught up in the flow of things and getting the kids to school and getting everybody where they need to be and making dinner, and I got to prepare for this next event, things going on. It's really easy to get caught up in that in life, and the opportunity you have as a leader in the church is to stop some of that and consider your purpose. Consider where you fit in this world and where you fit in with what God has planned for you. But as you're leading in the church, I have found it fuels you because you have a purpose for what you're doing. You're not just surviving life. You're intentionally going out there and listening for where God is calling you to help make a difference in the world. And that's a huge perspective shift from just getting by day to day to living my life on purpose.
So I think that's a great segue into the questions that people may have, because that's that emphasis on purpose. The other thing I'm hearing is, and I think we need to collectively agree that we're not going to use the word just, that I'm just the nursery worker, or I'm just helping in VBS. Can we all agree to put aside that word? And not to minimize the work that we each do in the church, because that's what makes this work, that's what makes it hum, that's what makes people who enter your doors feel welcome. They find a place then through the place that they see you working in. So I think we just collectively agree, and I encourage you to check each other on that. That if you hear that come out, because just VBS, that would be something I could not take on either. Yeah. Kids see the weakness in me, and they run roughshod sometimes over me, because you have to know how to handle kids. They don't let me. We run a child care center, and they don't ask me to come out and take care of kids for good reason. For good reason. All right. So questions. What do you have?
And if you have a question, it would be really helpful if you are feeling bold enough, if you would just step up to the microphone. It'll be recorded. Not only are we hearing it here, it will also be on our YouTube channel. So if you have a question, come up. Kevin, are you going to the bathroom or are you coming to the mic? That's good. You got up, so. Great.
So, Angie, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, good to see you.
You mentioned something about co-leadership, and I'd like to know a little bit more about what you meant by that. So I think there's probably a lot of hesitancy in people that are here to step up and lead, but sometimes in leadership we know it's not really the first person that's doing it, but it's the people that follow. So there's a YouTube video, Derek Stivers, millions of views. Some of you have seen it, and it's a rock concert on Hillside in San Francisco, and there's this guy that's doing this wild and crazy dance, and people are kind of pointing and laughing at him, but then some people are looking and saying, wait a minute, he's having a lot of fun. And so the next person that comes in starts doing the same wild gyrations, and all of a sudden more people see, and it just kind of overcomes the momentum of hesitancy. And so on. And so Derek Stiver says the true leader is not the first one, but it's the one that comes second. And that's part of the leadership equation. So you talked about co-leaders, you mentioned about Doug and you, and many others then. So help us understand, because I think that'll overcome the fear of being a leader, and that working together with people is really what leadership is all about. So share more. And then the committee, I think, also indicated that how there's this hesitancy to jump in. So please join in with Angie as well. Unpack that for us.
Okay. Yeah, I'll start it off, and then one of you may, or a couple of you may have an example too. I think part of it is knowing our gift areas, and we don't want to say no to something, but we know that we may not be able to hold that whole project, or it's going to be a big thing. Even if it's a smaller thing that you've been asked to do, or you perceive it as a smaller thing, there are certain, I just think sometimes we're so much stronger in teams. Because we complement each other. It's that whole idea of partnership. So in my work life, in my volunteer life, I don't know if it's self-awareness or what, but I've been very aware of areas I'm not, most of the time. Some people still help me out. My kids are good at helping me out. Mom, don't do that again. You're not really good at that. But it's listening to that and then responding. So I don't want it to keep me from leadership or from roles in the church, but knowing that I can't necessarily be the only person that does that. It's not my gift area. So do some of you have an example of a time when you've grabbed a co-leader or you've been the co-leader?
I love to work in teams, and whether I'm planning a retreat or working on the Fine Arts Academy, there are many of those areas that I can't do different things. I am not good in the area of making publications or writing things up or doing that type of a thing. I love the synergy of being in a team. I love bouncing ideas off of somebody else. And so I think that sometimes when we work in a silo, all those ideas just twirl around in our heads, and it's not until you say them out loud to somebody else and get that feedback then that you have a clearer idea of direction.
Share this. Going back to my VBS example, I had a co-chair in that particular case, and she was a teacher. I'm not a teacher, and people would not leave me alone with their children if they knew what was smart. I'm kidding. I love kids, but I'm not as patient as I think you need to be for a teacher. And the partnership that we had was absolutely perfect in delivering a VBS program, because I'm an organized person. I like to put a schedule together. I like to lay it all out and make sure that we have all the parts covered. But I was not good at working with the teachers in the classrooms to make sure those things went off smoothly. And I couldn't have done that. Professionally, I would have just been lost. So having her as a co-lead was absolutely the only way that program came off. So I treasure that.
So at St. Peter's, we are a team ministry, and one of the tools that we have found that is really useful for making sure your leadership teams are balanced and has an equal representation of what you need to make a project happen is a new perspective put out by Patrick Lencioni called the Working Geniuses. If you Google it, you'll find their podcast and all of his information. But we've been using this a lot on our team because what it says is they have found everybody fits into one of 6 working genius areas, and you have 2 that are your strengths, and that's you, and there are 2 that are probably your frustrations, and it's just not where you're gifted, and then in between there are the things you can do but you don't enjoy it. But at the same time, with these 6 different geniuses, they have found that a project will flow through those 6 genius areas. And so if you're operating on your own and you have 2 genius areas, there's 4 parts of that that's getting lost. For example, one of them is discernment, the genius of discernment, and being able to evaluate things and determine if something's a good idea or not. If you don't have someone on your team that has that, you may come up with some really bad ideas and execute them really well and then wonder what happened at the end of it. So we've talked a lot about how important that is to have all of those geniuses in a group so that we can pull things off.
I think something else that we can put aside today then, in light of that, and some other things we've said, is the idea that if you're a leader, you have to have it all together and do all of it. Because I think that's also something we put on ourselves. Well, I have to be good at all this. And I think that's the whole idea of being in a team and sharing that role, is that we can accentuate the things that we're good at and really shine there. But then, and also it's a gift to the others, right? Because you're engaging more people in the process. You're seeing that person who hasn't been in a role in the church, maybe hasn't been a part and engaged, and you can bring them into it. And that's a great way to engage them. Okay? Yep.
And if you have a question, feel free to come up. While you come up, Celine, real quickly. So, first week at iLead, we had President Mike Newman from Texas. He talked about mentoring. You've talked a lot about mentoring today and the importance of that. I've experienced it. You've given some great examples. So my question is, for you and for us, how do you initiate a mentoring relationship with someone? Can you speak to that and help us understand how to do that better?
On our iLead committee at Holy Cross, we have just been so much in conversation about this, and really talk a lot about how the one-on-one personal relationship with a person is so important. Even in this day and age of all the technology, the email, the texting, the blah, 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 just invite someone to coffee. And I actually learned that from my mentor, Dr. Tim Hallman, and I do it a lot. And people love it if they have the time or they want to make the time. You just sit down and have coffee, or even at your home, or meet at so many coffee shops these days, or lunch or something. But just that one-on-one personal conversation, I think, is the first step.
I just want to share that I think it's two-directional. First of all, I think we as leaders, church leaders, if you see somebody that you believe could be mentored into new roles and so forth, find somebody that you think would be a good mentor for them and ask them to initiate something in a relationship like that. I think also as individuals, when I want to learn something new from someone else because I see they are gifted in a particular area, I need to be willing to tap them on the shoulder and say, would you mentor me in this? One thing that so I think it can come from either direction, and I encourage both. And I think sometimes we think it has to be leaders identifying individuals, but no, as an individual, I think if I want to be mentored on how to better lead a meeting, it's watching somebody that's really skilled at it, I want to go talk and spend time with that individual to see how they garnered those skills and what can I do better. So, speak up.
Ask. Deb Myers, did you have something?
Yeah, trying to collect my thoughts, I apologize. So I think we all mentor in some way. We just don't realize it. And that's by setting a Christian example, by doing the gifts and talents that you are given by God to the best of your ability, because everybody's watching you. And they're taking note so that they can honor your Father in heaven for your good works. And so whatever you say, whatever you do, whatever you're good at, might encourage that next person to strive to do better themselves. And if you notice that, then go tell them, hey, thanks for watching me. You did a really good job when you did it. And just be a good encourager and walk alongside, follow up with them. That personal relationship is so important. And be sure to tell them good job, because oftentimes nowadays we don't hear that enough. So.
May start out as a relationship and become a mentorship.
So you guys have definitely talked about this partnership and mentorship, and as we began, also talked about how, asked the question, why should we have a women's panel? What's unique to that? But there are some things, perceived or real barriers right, that may come about for women stepping into leadership roles. So what, as a leader, as church leaders, what needs to be said or done to help remove those barriers for women to step into leadership?
Great question. Great question. What has to be said or done to remove those barriers to women in leadership? So.
One of the things that I've learned, especially, is that I needed to understand if there was a barrier, I needed to spend some time understanding how the other person works, what makes the other person tick, what is important. I worked with a pastor once who, when I would want to go in and work with him or talk with him, I knew that I had 15 minutes. Because after 15 minutes, his interest was somewhere else. All right, he would not be all there. So when I went into that person, then then I would have to make sure that I had all my ducks in a row. That whatever I was going to say to that with that pastor, the business that I had to do with him, that I made sure that I had them all in a row so that I could get through what needed to get done and get some answers and still be able to work with them. Another pastor that I worked with was confrontational. And mainly because I am such a laid-back person and he was such a hard get-it-done person, all right? But I had to understand that about him first and so that I wouldn't get my hackles up when I didn't feel like I was being listened to. I had to understand who he was and how he worked and how his brain worked. And because I'm one of those people that needs to think about what I'm going to say before I say it, I had to come up with scenarios in my mind. Well, what if he goes this way with what I'm talking about? Or what if he responds in this way? What will I say back? So, in other words, there needed to be some preparation. And I think, as a woman, sometimes we get the feedback that we're too emotional or that some of us cry more easily than others, and not because we're that upset, it's just that we cry because we're female. And we just need to understand that and help the men that we partner along with, that we minister with, to understand that when we cry, we're not mad at them and they don't have to solve it. That's just the way we operate, all right? That's just the emotionalness, and it just might be hormones. Who knows, all right? But that's kind of sometimes how we are. And to let them know that that you're not being personally combative, or you're not being a wimp because you've got tears in your eyes, is something that we need to communicate. It's not always an easy relationship. I get that, but I think understanding who you're talking with and understand how they operate, and then try to always be prepared in a way that you go in will really go a long ways toward that.
Did you have?
So wonderful. Am I okay? And then I wanted to say too, you said what could be said or done. Back to what Laura was talking about in mentoring, I wonder if you just, if you're wanting to say something, just say, could you help me understand this, or could you mentor me in that way, instead of feeling like the defense or the wall there. Offer your open-mindedness to that person and just ask for help. Just say, could you help me? Could you help me understand this?
Lana, did you have something? Okay. Laura.
I do. I work in a team where our leader's just so outstanding in terms of listening, inviting ideas, inviting collaboration. It's huge. And I guess the only thing I would encourage people in those situations where it isn't like that you do the kinds of things that win that individual over to the point where you can carry on a good relationship, a good partnership.
I think one of the most important things you can do to continue to encourage women in leadership is to support those that are doing it. Let's face it, not every day is an easy day as a leader in the church. And you can't always make everyone happy, and eventually you're going to upset someone. And words of kindness, words of encouragement for those women who are coming forward and they are serving the church can go a long way towards building them up and keeping them going even when the days are tough. So all of us can do that. All of us can reach out to the leaders in our congregations and our communities and just encourage them and let them know you're praying for them and you're there to support them.
And I just want to add one little piece. I think the whole seeking to understand component in those situations is really critical. Because I think sometimes it's a perceived barrier, not a real barrier. I don't know that that's the case always, but sometimes it's a perceived barrier. And I think you need to understand with the other individuals what is the true barrier here? Is it a barrier to a specific role? Is it et cetera? And are there other options that could maybe make that leadership opportunity be fulfilling for the individual? So I think that topic of confusion around the role of women in the church is one that's out there. And I have it because of how I grew up. I'm a PK. I'm also a PW, okay? So I have a background where my father was very prescriptive about the role of women. The funny thing is, I have two sisters, and the most rebellious one listened to him. But my dad loved us tremendously, good man of God, just a wonderful model, from a spiritual perspective, but he had a very, very narrow perspective on women. And so I think that has framed some of my thinking. And so my mom, wonderful pastor's wife, just the most generous heart in the world. And if I looked at the two of them and the roles they played, I believe she was the stronger leader of the two. My perspective, but truly someone I wanted to emulate in leadership. But she broke down barriers by her soft and gentle way and her diligence at working through situations. I admired that woman her entire life, and I wish I was more like her than my dad, and my husband reminds me I have my dad in me. So, anyway, probably too much information.
No, because as we share personally, that's where we see those points of connection. So to kind of bring this home, I hope you have heard us say, every one of you that's here today, and people that are coming to your mind that maybe didn't participate in this back in your congregations are needed in this work. Every single one, and there is a place for you. It kind of answering that last question, start with the willing. So if you're a leader now and you're asking people and bringing them in, start with those that are willing, that you ask. And those of you that are looking for a place, and maybe you're seeing those barriers, go to the willing, because there's somebody that's going to engage you in leadership. It may not be the spot that you initially thought, but start somewhere because you're needed. And really the ministry of the church, the ongoing work of the church, the resilience of the church that Pastor Gabe Casper talked about last week needs us to be engaged. So hopefully you've been encouraged in this today, and I'm going to turn it back to Pastor.
Well, let's take a moment and thank our panel and our facilitators.